We're sitting here getting reacquainted with Dan Blocker, and of course you know him as Hoss on Bonanza.
You know, I don't believe, though, that there's any character on television with whom the public identifies more than this Hoss character that you play.
Have you ever wondered how a single TV character could capture the hearts of millions only to leave fans with lasting questions? Dan Blocker was more than just an actor. He was a towering figure who brought warmth and depth to one of television's most enduring westerns. As Hoss Cartwright on Bonanza, he became a cherished staple in countless households. Yet behind that friendly smile lay hidden truths, unexpected struggles, and a wrenching end that would shock Hollywood. Today, we'll explore his early life in Texas, his sudden leap into stardom, and the mystery surrounding his abrupt death. Plus, what happened to his family and the fortune he left behind. Dan Blocker's arrival in the world was dramatic. Born on December 10, 1928, in Bowie County, Texas, he weighed a record-breaking 14 pounds. His parents, Ora Shack Blocker and Mary Blocker, had endured the Great Depression and worked tirelessly to keep food on the table. Young Dan grew up helping in his father's grocery store, lugging groceries out to cars and learning the value of hard work. His imposing frame made him a natural on the football field, and he earned a scholarship to Sul Ross State University as a linebacker. But fate intervened when he was cast in a college production of Arsenic and Old Lace, where the applause and laughter sparked in him a sudden love for performing. He soon switched his major to theater, surprising everyone who expected him to continue on the gridiron. Another major turning point came with the Korean War. Drafted into the U.S. Army, Dan served with distinction as an infantry sergeant, later earning a Purple Heart. Once honorably discharged, he returned to Texas, married his college sweetheart Dolphia Parker, and tried to settle into a normal life. Teaching English and drama paid the bills, but deep down, Dan never lost the thrill he experienced on stage. When they moved to California, he intended to pursue a PhD at UCLA. Instead, he began auditioning for television roles to earn extra money, landing small parts in popular westerns like Gunsmoke and The Rifleman. Before long, Dan was noticed by producer David Dortort, who recognized the gentle giant's special spark. Cast as Eric Hoss Cartwright in Bonanza, Dan became indispensable to the series. Bonanza's focus on the close-knit Cartwright family resonated with audiences, and Hoss, with his huge heart, stood out as the show's moral anchor. Co-stars Lorne Greene, Ben, Michael Landon, Little Joe, and Pernell Roberts, Adam, became like a second family, and viewers grew attached to the dynamic on screen. Although Roberts eventually left, citing creative frustrations, Dan remained steadfast, playing Hoss with the same earnest charm that had won him the role. In time, Bonanza soared in the ratings, making Blocker a household name. Yet he was never fully comfortable with fame. While he appreciated fan support, the crowds could be overwhelming for a man who viewed acting as a profession rather than a path to celebrity. He kept his private life under wraps, living in a modest house in Northridge with his wife and 4 children, twin daughters Deborah Lee and Dana Lynn, plus sons David and Dirk. An unpretentious family man, Dan drove a Corvette but mostly stayed away from glittering Hollywood events. In interviews, he voiced gratitude for the show's success and affection for his co-stars, though he disliked the invasive nature of fame. As Bonanza entered its second decade, cracks began to show. The show shifted time slots, and competition from new programming caused ratings to drop. Still, the Cartwright family maintained a devoted audience. Dan, meanwhile, contemplated his future. Deeply opposed to the Vietnam War, he moved his family to Switzerland for a while, hoping to shield them from political unrest. Critics whispered that his stance might distance him from executives, but Dan seemed undeterred. He continued shuttling between Europe and the Paramount lot, determined to fulfill his obligations to Bonanza. Then tragedy intervened. In May 1972, Dan entered the hospital for a routine gallbladder operation. At 43, he was still in his physical prime, so no one expected complications. But shortly after the surgery, he suffered a sudden pulmonary embolism and died. The news left fellow cast members, friends, and fans in disbelief. How could the man who embodied good-natured strength vanish without warning? Dan's death upended Bonanza. Executive producer David Dortort had to decide whether to continue without Hoss. In that era, few shows addressed the real-life death of a major character. Some series simply recast the role, while others wrote characters out in a single line. But Hoss was too central to Bonanza's fabric. They elected to move forward while acknowledging his absence on screen. Michael Landon had to rewrite scripts for the upcoming season, shifting plot lines that would have spotlighted Hoss. Filming the first episodes without him was emotionally crushing for a cast that felt like an extended family. Viewers noticed the missing presence. Hoss had been a benevolent force, uniting the family in times of tension. Without that guiding spirit, Bonanza felt incomplete. Ratings declined further, and by 1973 the network decided to cancel the series. Even if Bonanza had been struggling, many saw Dan's death as the tipping point. The impact was felt beyond the production lot. Dan had accumulated a notable fortune, with estimates placing his net worth around $5 million, a significant sum for the era. The question of what would become of his holdings naturally arose, especially among fans curious about how his family would carry on. Real estate was one major component of Dan's portfolio. He owned a home in Hancock Park that years later would become famous again when rock musician Rob Zombie moved in. He also purchased property in Inglewood, and a stretch of coastline in Malibu would be donated in his honor by Michael Landon and Lorne Greene, eventually recognized as Dan Blocker Beach. It was a testament to the respect and affection his co-stars had for him. His wife, Dolphia, never sought the limelight but quietly managed the estate and focused on their children, all of whom were profoundly affected by the loss. Both sons would follow paths into the entertainment industry. David eventually became a producer, winning an Emmy for his work on Don King, Only in America. Dirk, for his part, pursued acting, appearing on iconic shows like 21 Jump Street and later winning over fans in Brooklyn Nine-Nine as Detective Hitchcock. In interviews, both brothers spoke of their father's profound influence. Dirk remembered going to set with Dan, absorbing lessons simply by watching how the Bonanza cast interacted. It planted the seeds for his own career. He also revealed that Dan never encouraged or discouraged his children from entering show business. He only advised them to pursue honest work that brought them genuine fulfillment. Over the years, conspiracy theories occasionally surfaced. Some questioned whether medical negligence led to Dan's death, as gallbladder surgeries are typically routine. Friends and co-stars stayed silent on such rumors, sticking to the official explanation of a tragic embolism. In any case, the result was the same. A tremendous void on a beloved show, the sorrow of friends who missed his big-hearted nature, and a family left with memories that still resonate. Decades later, reruns of Bonanza continue to captivate new generations. Nostalgic fans recall a time when westerns dominated television, championing simpler ideals of courage, loyalty, and family unity. Dan's Hoss Cartwright embodied those virtues, sometimes more authentically than other characters. His on-screen warmth stemmed from a genuine kindness he displayed in real life, whether he was joking with cast members or politely greeting strangers. Many attest that what viewers saw on-screen mirrored Dan himself, a man who carried compassion everywhere he went. To honor Dan, certain Bonanza episodes pay subtle tribute to his absence. When the show tried to continue without him, it did so with quiet references to a loss the Cartwrights couldn't quite name. Michael Landon, who wrote and directed various episodes, felt it best not to dwell on the character's off-screen fate. Instead, hints of sorrow and moments of reflection replaced Hoss's usual good humor. In one of the final episodes, Little Joe endures heartbreak that echoed the real-life grief of the cast. Viewers can still sense the emotional weight when re-watching those scenes. Outside of Bonanza, Dan also appeared in feature films, notably opposite Frank Sinatra in Come Blow Your Horn and Lady in Cement. Yet he never allowed stardom to go to his head. Accounts from friends suggest that even on the biggest Hollywood sets, he remained the same approachable, warm-spirited man who had once taught in rural schools. He didn't court publicity, rarely gave bombastic interviews, and seemed genuinely startled by the attention fans lavished on him. Perhaps that modesty is partly why his memory endures so fondly. In his final year, he was more politically vocal than ever, voicing disagreement with policies he saw as unjust. He had also begun mulling new horizons, discussing with Dolphia the possibility of stepping away from the screen to explore other ventures. Those closest to him aren't certain whether he would have fully left acting. Some think he might have returned to teaching or sought a quieter life. Others suggest he would have continued in entertainment, perhaps choosing smaller roles. The tragedy is that we'll never know. Life dealt him an impossible card, cutting short a journey that still had many chapters left to unfold. What remains are the joyful memories shared by co-stars like Lorne Greene, Michael Landon, and those who experienced Dan's humor and humility on set. Their stories paint a picture of a man who succeeded not through ego, but through an unassuming dedication to doing the job well. Members of the cast once recalled how Dan would break tension by pulling harmless pranks or telling offhand jokes, keeping morale high during grueling production schedules. Had events turned out differently, he might have continued lifting spirits on set for years. Bonanza, for its part, left a tremendous cultural legacy. It introduced millions of viewers to a version of the Old West that, while romanticized, still tackled social issues like discrimination and violence. The episodes in which Hoss championed underdogs or tried to mediate conflicts carry a message of empathy still relevant today. And with reruns streaming, new fans discover Dan's talent for comedic timing, his knack for earnest drama, and the subtle, heartfelt touches that made Hoss so beloved. You could say that Dan Blocker still rides across America's living rooms, continuing to inspire warmth and hope. Regarding Dan's net worth, most sources settle on $5 million in early 1970s terms. Adjusted for inflation, that sums to a fairly large fortune. Real estate alone accounted for a portion of his wealth, ensuring his children were well supported after his death. Some rumors claim he arranged special trusts or offshore accounts, though his family has never confirmed such claims. They've mostly chosen to remember him for his genuine spirit, rather than delve into financial complexities. What about Dolphia and the 4 children? Dolphia remained out of the public eye, grieving in private. The twins, Deborah and Dana, pursued their own lives away from Hollywood. David and Dirk both achieved professional success in film and television. Today, they sometimes offer glimpses of old family photos, recalling tender moments with their father. On social media, Dirk has posted heartfelt tributes on Father's Day, showing how deeply he still feels that paternal bond. When asked about Dan, the siblings describe a father who was larger than life in more ways than one, a man who dedicated himself to giving them a stable upbringing, even amid the whirlwind of TV fame. The 1988 TV movie Bonanza: The Next Generation addressed Hoss's absence by saying he died heroically while saving someone else's life. It seemed like a fitting send-off for a character defined by love and kindness. In reality, the show's creators had faced an unprecedented challenge, unsure how to move forward without one of their main stars. To a large extent, that grief was real. Michael Landon openly admitted that filming certain scenes became an emotional ordeal. At Dan Blocker Beach, visitors sometimes pause at the plaque commemorating him. They may be unaware of the deeper story, the lifelong friendships he forged, his refusal to surrender his beliefs, or the sheer generosity that made him stand out among Hollywood personalities. But his spirit continues there in Malibu, a reminder of the gentleness he brought to a world that can often seem harsh. In sum, Dan Blocker's life encompassed soaring highs and heartbreaking lows. He began as a small-town Texan whose first major role involved carrying props for a college play. He emerged as a TV icon recognized by millions, only to exit abruptly in a scenario few saw coming. His net worth, property holdings, and name recognition were extraordinary compared to his humble background. Yet his children say he never lost touch with his roots. He remained the same gentle giant, whether teaching in a dusty classroom, cracking jokes with Sinatra, or standing in front of cameras on the Ponderosa. We may speculate about what he might have done if fate had been kinder, perhaps direct films or champion the peace movement more openly. Maybe he would have stepped away from Hollywood entirely, settling into a quiet academic life. His passing left those possibilities hanging in midair, never to be realized. The void he left in Bonanza was so immense that many fans see his final year as the show's turning point. Without Hoss, the Cartwright family wasn't complete. Yet even in death, Dan Blocker's influence didn't disappear. It lived on in the cast's decision to tackle tragedy honestly, in the way future shows handled the loss of beloved characters, and in the countless hearts warmed by his portrayal. He might have been uncomfortable with the idea of leaving a grand legacy. It just wasn't his style to crave the spotlight. But fans and friends alike still speak of him with deep respect. The next time you stumble on a Bonanza rerun, remember that behind that friendly cowboy smile was a real man who balanced his towering frame with a soul brimming with compassion. His children, now fully grown, ensure that Dan's memory remains alive. Dirk's roles often demonstrate a comic flair, suggesting he inherited a bit of his father's ability to elicit a grin. David's producing credits showcase the behind-the-scenes know-how that mirrors Dan's own dedication to hard work. Meanwhile, fans celebrate the fact that Bonanza episodes are readily available, preserving a window into a gentler era of TV, and a gentler personality whose warmth still shines through the screen. Above all, Dan Blocker's story speaks to how swiftly life can change, how even the biggest personalities can exit with little warning, and how kindness can leave a legacy that outlives a fleeting Hollywood career. Now, with every replay and tribute, we're reminded of the man who saw acting as honest work, not a vehicle for ego. He gave us Hoss, a character whose empathy transcended the usual cowboy tropes. He left his family enough financial security to pursue their dreams. He also left them an enduring example of integrity in an industry that can sometimes lose sight of basic decency. That alone explains why, so many years after his final bow, we're still drawn to Dan Blocker's story, a tale of a Texas giant whose heart matched his stature, both on the stage and in real life. Even after Bonanza concluded, Dan Blocker's presence endured in the public imagination. Reruns across various networks introduced new audiences to the simple but powerful moral lessons at the heart of each episode. People saw Hoss Cartwright as a mirror of Dan himself, loyal, quick to help, and guided by an unshakable moral compass. Fan clubs dedicated to the show kept his memory alive, producing newsletters that detailed behind-the-scenes anecdotes or reprinted rare interviews he had given. Over time, conventions sprouted, where attendees discussed classic westerns and shared stories of what Hoss had meant to them in their youth. Some recalled watching Bonanza every Sunday night with parents or grandparents, forging cherished family traditions. Others collected memorabilia, like vintage photos and autographed scripts. In that sense, Dan became more than a television star. He grew into a comforting figure from a nostalgic era, representing values that many feel have been lost to modern cynicism. Although decades have passed, the warmth he brought to the screen continues to resonate. Even those who discover Bonanza by accident, perhaps flipping channels late at night, are often surprised by how quickly Hoss's gentle presence draws them in. In an ever-changing world, Dan Blocker's legacy stands as a reminder that genuine kindness can transcend both time and tragic endings. His memory continues to shine, bridging generations with a timeless portrayal of compassion.